Whispering Waves. Chapter 1. Shore of Wanderers. The coast stretched wide under the pale sky of early morning, and the Atlantic breathed with a rhythm that seemed older than time itself. The waves rolled in, one after another, carrying whispers that only the patient could hear. On this shore gathered wanderers, people who had no place to call home or who had left their homes behind in search of something they could not name. They were united not by joy but by silence, and by the sound of the ocean that spoke to them in ways no human voice could. Each came not for rest but to listen, to wait for the tide to reveal fragments of stories hidden in its endless motion. The sea was not gentle, nor was it cruel. It was a keeper of memory, and those who stood on its edge believed that it carried the voices of the past. Maria Lorenzo arrived for the first time, her steps slow and uncertain as she crossed the sand. She was 29 years old, a wanderer who had left behind the familiar streets of her town after a loss that had broken her spirit. Her heart was heavy with grief, and she carried it like a stone inside her chest. She had heard of this shore from others. Whispers passed between travelers who spoke of waves that told stories. Some said the ocean could comfort the lonely, others claimed it revealed truths that people tried to hide. Maria did not know what to expect, but she felt drawn to the water as if it had been calling her for a long time. She stood at the edge of the tide, the cold foam touching her feet, and listened. Around her were others who had come for the same reason. Erik Hansen, a man of 34, stood with his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was a former sailor, his body strong but his spirit marked by sorrow. He had lost his ship and his friends to a storm years before, and he believed the ocean carried their voices still. He listened not for comfort but for connection, hoping to hear the echoes of those who had vanished beneath the waves. Nearby was Luisa Carvalho, a woman of 41, her face lined with years of wandering. She believed deeply in the secret voices of the ocean, convinced that each wave carried the memory of forgotten love. She had once turned away from love, and now she searched for it in the whispers of the tide. The old fisherman also sat on the rocks, his presence quiet but steady. He was the keeper of ancient coastal stories, a man who had lived his life beside the sea and who knew its moods better than anyone. He did not speak, but his eyes seemed to hold the weight of centuries. Maria felt the silence of the shore pressing around her. It was not an empty silence but one filled with meaning, shaped by the rhythm of the waves. She realized that the wanderers were not simply waiting for the ocean to speak. They were waiting for themselves to be ready to hear. The sea did not give answers easily. It demanded patience, honesty, and courage. Maria closed her eyes and let the sound of the tide wash over her. She thought of the person she had lost, of the emptiness that had followed, and of the questions that had no answers. The ocean seemed to respond, not with words but with a feeling, a presence that reminded her she was not alone. On the coast gathered wanderers, united not by joy but by silence and the sound of waves. Each came not for rest but to hear the stories whispered by the ocean in the morning tide. Maria Lorenzo arrived for the first time, her heart heavy with grief, searching for answers in the voice of the sea. She stood among strangers, yet she felt connected to them, for they were all bound by the same search. The shore became a place of trial and of hope, teaching her that grief was not the end but the beginning of listening. The ocean whispered, and Maria began to understand that its stories were not only about the past but also about the strength to face the future. Chapter 2. Voices of the Ocean. The morning tide moved with slow rhythm, and the sound of the waves filled the shore with a voice that seemed both endless and personal. Erik Hansen stood close to the water, his body strong but marked by years of hardship. He was 34, a man who had once lived on ships, crossing oceans with confidence and skill. Yet his life had changed when a storm had taken his vessel and the friends who had sailed with him. Since that day, he carried silence inside him, a silence that no human word could break. As he listened to the waves, he heard something that others could not. The ocean spoke to him with the voices of those he had lost. He heard laughter that once filled the deck, he heard shouts of warning from the storm, and he heard the final cries that had faded into the water. The sound was not clear like speech, but it was strong enough to pierce his heart. Erik felt both pain and comfort, for the ocean gave him connection to the past, even as it reminded him of loss. Luisa Carvalho stood further back, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was 41, a drifter who had wandered from place to place, never staying long enough to call anywhere home. Her life had been shaped by choices she regretted, especially the love she had once turned away. She believed deeply that the ocean carried memories of forgotten love, and she listened to the waves as if they were letters written to her by the past. Each wave seemed to bring her a message, soft but powerful, reminding her of the warmth she had rejected and the tenderness she had lost. She felt the touch of that love in the spray of the tide, and she imagined that the ocean was holding it for her, keeping it alive even when she had let it go. For Luisa, the voices of the ocean were not cries of sorrow but whispers of longing, teaching her that love never truly vanished, even when it was denied. Lorenzo watched them both, her heart heavy with grief but her mind open to the mystery of the shore. She was 29, a wanderer who had come to the ocean searching for comfort after loss. She did not hear the voices of sailors or the whispers of forgotten love. Instead, the ocean spoke to her in a way that was quiet and personal. It revealed the emptiness she carried inside, the silence that followed her wherever she went. The waves seemed to tell her that grief was not something to escape but something to accept. She realized that the ocean spoke differently to each person, showing them what they hid inside. For Erik it was sorrow for his companions, for Luisa it was regret for lost love, and for her it was the truth of her own pain. Maria understood that the ocean was not giving answers but reflections, and that listening to it meant facing what lived within the heart. The wanderers stood together, yet each was alone in the way the ocean spoke to them. The sound of the tide was the same for all, but its meaning was different. The voices of the ocean were not simple echoes, they were mirrors of the soul. Erik felt the weight of memory, Luisa felt the ache of longing, and Maria felt the presence of grief. The old fisherman watched them from the rocks, his eyes calm, as if he had seen this many times before. He knew that the ocean spoke to everyone in its own way, and that its lessons were never easy. The waves rolled on, carrying stories from the past, reminding the wanderers that the sea was not only water but also memory. Erik Hansen, a former sailor, listened to the waves and heard the voices of his lost companions. Luisa Carvalho believed that each wave carried the memory of forgotten love. Maria realized that the ocean spoke differently to each person, revealing what they hid inside. The voices of the ocean became their trial, teaching them that the past was never gone, and that listening meant accepting the truth that lived within. Chapter 3. Secret of the Fisherman. The old fisherman sat on the rocks near the shore, his figure steady against the restless sea. His face was marked by years of salt and wind, and his eyes carried the calm weight of someone who had lived his entire life beside the ocean. He was not a man of many words, but when he spoke, his voice seemed to carry the rhythm of the waves themselves. He explained that the ocean was more than water and tide. It was a keeper of memory, holding the stories of all who had ever looked upon its vastness. Every gaze, every thought, every sorrow and joy left a trace in the sea, and the waves carried those traces endlessly. The fisherman believed that the ocean whispered these stories back to those who were willing to listen, but he warned that listening was not simple. Only those ready to accept the truth could hear the voices clearly. Maria Lorenzo listened with her heart heavy. She was 29, a wanderer who had come to the shore searching for comfort after loss. The fisherman's words struck her deeply, for she understood that the ocean would not give her easy answers. It would not erase her grief or silence her pain. Instead, it would show her the truth she carried inside, even the parts she wished to hide. She realized that her trial was only beginning, and that the sea would demand honesty from her. She felt both fear and hope, knowing that the voices of the waves could reveal what she needed to face. Erik Hansen stood nearby, his strong frame tense as he listened. He was 34, a former sailor who had lost his ship and friends to the storm. The fisherman's words reminded him that the ocean did not forget. The cries of his companions, the laughter of their journeys, and the silence of their end were all stored in the waves. Erik understood that listening meant facing those memories again, and he felt the weight of them pressing against his chest. He wanted connection, but he feared the pain that came with it. The fisherman's warning was clear. The ocean gave truth, not comfort, and Erik knew that his own trial was waiting. Luisa Carvalho, the drifter of 41 years, watched the fisherman with quiet respect. She had always believed that the ocean carried the memory of forgotten love, and now she heard confirmation in his words. She thought of the love she had once turned away, the tenderness she had rejected, and she realized that the sea had kept it alive. The fisherman's warning reminded her that listening meant accepting regret, and she felt the ache of it rising inside her. She understood that the ocean would not let her escape the truth of her choices. The fisherman's presence was more than human. He seemed to embody the shore itself, a living reminder that the ocean was eternal and that its whispers were not for the careless. His words carried no judgment, only truth, and the wanderers felt the weight of them. They realized that the sea was not a place of escape but a place of revelation. It demanded courage, honesty, and acceptance. The old fisherman explained that the ocean kept the stories of all who had ever looked upon its vastness. He warned that only those ready to accept the truth could listen to the waves. Maria understood that her trial was only beginning. She realized that the ocean was not offering her comfort but a mirror, and that listening to its whispers meant facing herself. The shore became a place of trial, and the fisherman's secret became their lesson. The sea carried every story, but only those who accepted truth could hear its voice. Chapter 4. Trial of Memory. The ocean grew restless as the tide rose higher, and the sound of the waves became heavier, almost like a voice that carried weight. The wanderers stood on the shore, and each of them felt that the sea was no longer only water and wind. It was alive with memory, and it began to show them what they had tried to hide. The trial of memory was not gentle, for the ocean did not give comfort. It demanded honesty, and it revealed the past with clarity that could not be denied. Maria Lorenzo stood closest to the water, her eyes fixed on the horizon. She was 29, a wanderer who had come to the shore searching for comfort after loss. The waves rose and fell, and in their rhythm she saw the face of the one she had lost. It appeared not as a shadow but as a clear image, filled with the warmth she remembered and the silence that followed his absence. Her heart trembled, for the ocean was forcing her to face the grief she carried. She realized that she had tried to escape it by wandering, but the sea reminded her that grief was not something to run from. It was part of her, and only by accepting it could she find strength. The trial of memory was painful, but it was also a lesson. Erik Hansen stood nearby, his strong frame tense as the waves spoke to him. He was 34, a former sailor who had lost his ship and friends in a storm. The ocean did not let him forget. He heard the cries of his companions, the shouts of warning, and the silence that followed when the sea swallowed them. The sound was not clear like human voices, but it was strong enough to pierce his heart. Erik felt the weight of guilt pressing against him, for he believed he should have saved them. The trial of memory reminded him that the ocean carried their voices, and that he could not escape the truth of what had happened. He understood that the sea was not punishing him but demanding that he accept the reality of loss. His sorrow was deep, but the trial showed him that memory was not meant to destroy him. It was meant to teach him that courage was not about forgetting but about living with truth. Luisa Carvalho stood further back, her eyes closed as the tide touched her feet. She was 41, a drifter who believed in the secret voices of the ocean. The waves spoke to her with tenderness, and she felt the touch of the love she had once rejected. It came not as a voice but as a feeling, a warmth that reminded her of the choice she had made long ago. She had turned away from love, believing that freedom was more important, but now the ocean showed her the truth of what she had lost. The trial of memory was cruel in its honesty, for it reminded her that regret was part of her soul. She felt tears rise, but she also felt clarity. The ocean was not offering her comfort but truth, and she realized that love never truly vanished. It lived in memory, carried by the waves, waiting for her to accept it. The old fisherman watched them from the rocks, his eyes calm and steady. He had seen many wanderers face the trial of memory, and he knew that the ocean did not lie. It revealed what people carried inside, whether sorrow, regret, or longing. The trial was not about punishment but about honesty. The waves showed each of them their past, and they understood that listening to the ocean meant facing themselves. Maria saw the face of the one she had lost. Erik heard the cries of his companions drowned in the storm. Luisa felt the touch of the love she had once rejected. The ocean did not give comfort, it demanded honesty. The trial of memory became their lesson, teaching them that the past was never gone, and that only by accepting it could they find strength to continue. Chapter 5. Disappearance of Hope. The waves grew louder as the evening tide came in, and the shore seemed heavy with sorrow. The ocean no longer whispered softly but carried voices that pressed against the hearts of those who listened. Erik Hansen stood close to the water, his body tense, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was 34, a former sailor who had once lived with strength and pride, but the storm that had taken his ship and his companions had left him broken. The voices of the dead rose from the tide, calling to him with echoes of laughter, cries of warning, and silence that followed their end. He felt their presence so strongly that it was as if they were standing beside him. The weight of guilt and grief became too much for him to carry. He believed that the ocean was offering him reunion, and he could not resist. Slowly, he walked into the sea, his steps steady but filled with despair, as if he wished to join those who had been lost. The water closed around him, and the shore became emptier, leaving only the sound of waves to mark his disappearance. Luisa Carvalho watched with tears in her eyes. She was 41, a drifter who had always believed in the secret voices of the ocean. For her, the waves carried the memory of forgotten love, and she had come to the shore hoping to feel its warmth again. But as she listened, she realized that the love she had once rejected was gone forever. The ocean reminded her of the choice she had made long ago, the tenderness she had turned away, and the regret that had followed her through the years. She felt the ache of loss rise inside her, stronger than ever, and she wept openly, her body shaking with sorrow. The voices of the ocean did not comfort her, they showed her the truth she had tried to deny. Her hope disappeared like the tide, leaving her with only memory and regret. Maria Lorenzo stood apart, her heart heavy but her spirit steady. She was 29, a wanderer who had come to the shore searching for comfort after loss. She had listened to the voices of the ocean, and she had seen Erik walk into the sea and Luisa collapse in tears. Yet she did not turn away. She felt the pain of grief, but she also felt a new strength rising inside her. The ocean had shown her the face of the one she had lost, and it had demanded honesty from her. She realized that sorrow was part of her life, but it did not have to destroy her. She accepted the truth of her loss, and in that acceptance she found power. Her heart grew stronger, not because the pain was gone, but because she had learned to carry it. The old fisherman watched from the rocks, his eyes calm and steady. He had seen many wanderers face the ocean, and he knew that its lessons were never easy. The disappearance of hope was part of the trial, for the sea demanded honesty and courage. Erik could not bear the voices of the dead and walked into the sea, as if to join them. Luisa wept, realizing her love was gone forever. Maria remained, but her heart grew stronger. The shore became a place of sorrow and of strength, teaching them that the ocean did not give comfort but truth. The disappearance of hope was not the end but the beginning of understanding, for only those who accepted their pain could find the light that waited beyond it. Chapter 6. The Last Night. The night fell slowly over the coast, and the sky turned into a wide canvas of dark blue, scattered with stars that seemed to watch the earth in silence. The ocean moved with steady rhythm, its waves rising and falling like breaths of a giant creature. Maria Lorenzo sat alone on the sand, her body tired but her spirit awake. She was 29, a wanderer who had carried grief across many roads, and now she faced the sea as if it were her final companion. The voices of the ocean surrounded her, not loud but constant, whispering stories that belonged to others. She listened carefully, and each wave seemed to carry a memory, a fragment of a life that had once been lived. Some waves spoke of sailors who had never returned. Others carried the laughter of children who had played on the shore long ago, and still others carried the quiet sorrow of lovers who had been separated. Maria realized that the ocean was not only a keeper of the past but also a messenger of the future. She closed her eyes and allowed the tide to speak to her heart. The voices did not come in words but in feelings, rising and falling with the rhythm of the water. She felt the pain of others, but she also felt their strength. The ocean told her that every person carried sorrow, but sorrow was not the end. It was a path to light if one accepted it. Maria understood that her own grief was part of this truth. She had lost someone dear, and she had wandered in search of comfort, but now she realized that comfort was not something the world could give her. It was something she had to find inside herself. The ocean whispered that acceptance was the key, and she felt her heart grow stronger as she listened. The night was long, but Maria did not sleep. She watched the stars move slowly across the sky, and she listened to the endless rhythm of the waves. She thought of Erik Hansen, the sailor who had walked into the sea, and she felt sorrow for his choice. She thought of Luisa Carvalho, who had wept for her lost love, and she felt compassion for her pain. The ocean carried their voices too, reminding Maria that every soul faced its own trial. She realized that the sea did not judge them. It simply revealed the truth they carried, and it was up to each person to accept or reject it. Maria felt gratitude for the lesson, for she understood that her trial was not about escaping grief but about living with it honestly. As the night moved toward dawn, Maria felt a change inside her. The ocean no longer spoke only of sorrow. It began to whisper of hope, of paths that could open if she chose to walk them. She felt that the waves were telling her that the future was not empty, that light waited for those who accepted their pain and carried it with courage. She realized that her wandering had brought her here for a reason, and that the shore was not the end of her journey but the beginning of a new one. The last night became her moment of clarity, teaching her that the ocean was not only a keeper of memory but also a guide to strength. Maria spent the night on the shore, listening to the ocean whisper the stories of others. She understood that the waves spoke not only of the past but also of the future. They told her that every person could find light if they accepted their pain. The last night gave her peace, and she knew that when dawn arrived, she would carry the lesson with her. The ocean had demanded honesty, and she had given it. In return, it had shown her that grief was not the end but the beginning of strength. Chapter 7. Resolution. The first light of dawn spread across the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of gold and pale blue. The ocean moved quietly now, its waves gentle, as if it had finished speaking for the night. Maria Lorenzo stood on the shore, her figure calm against the rising sun. She was 29, a wanderer who had carried grief across many roads, but in this moment she no longer felt like a stranger to herself. The voices of the ocean had shown her sorrow, regret, and memory, yet they had also given her clarity. She realized that she did not need to search for comfort in distant places, because strength was already within her. The sea had not erased her pain, but it had taught her how to carry it with honesty. She looked back at the small village, its houses quiet in the morning light. The people there had lived with the ocean all their lives, and they had learned to respect its whispers. Maria understood now why the old fisherman had spoken with such calm certainty. He had known that the ocean was not a place of escape but a place of truth. She felt gratitude for his presence, for his silent guidance, and for the lesson that the waves had given her. She realized that the fisherman had not needed to tell her everything, because the sea itself had spoken more clearly than words ever could. Maria thought of Erik Hansen, the sailor who had walked into the water, and of Luisa Carvalho, who had wept for her lost love. Their stories were part of the ocean now, carried in its endless rhythm. She felt sorrow for them, but she also understood that each person faced their own trial. The ocean had demanded honesty, and not everyone could accept it. Maria had listened, and she had accepted, and that was why she remained. She knew that the waves would continue to whisper their stories long after she left, but she no longer needed to stay. The lesson was already inside her, and it would guide her wherever she went. As the sun rose higher, Maria turned away from the shore and began to walk. Her steps were steady, her heart lighter than before. She no longer searched for comfort because she had found strength within herself. The ocean had become not a place of loss but a place of truth. She realized that the whispering waves had taught her the most important lesson. Life continued if one was ready to listen and accept. The past would always remain, carried by the sea, but the future was open, waiting for those who had the courage to face it. Moral: the ocean keeps the stories of the past, but true strength is born in the human heart. Only those who accept their pain and face it with honesty can find light and move forward. Thank you for your attention. If you like the story, please like and subscribe. It motivates us to make new videos and helps us promote the channel. Thank you.